Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Jamie Babsacklin. I'm a Chartered Financial Planner from Melbourne Capital Group, and today we're joined by Andy Davison, the founder of TEG Media. And today is basically going to be the first of a series of webinars to talk about MM2H, about retiring in Malaysia, and why we all live here and why people continue to come and live here. So today's is going to be a focus on the current visa, and then we're going to be looking at hospitals, cost of living, income, pensions, various different things over the next few months, and you'll keep getting updates from us. As I said, if anybody has any questions throughout today's webinar, please do type them in the chat at the top, and we will get to them later on through the Q&A session. So, as I say, welcome, Andy. If you want to give us a quick background on yourself.
No, it's good to be here. I started what we call TEG Media in 1996, and I launched a magazine called the Expat magazine, which targets all the foreigners who are living here, and is still running today, as other print magazines seem to be declining. But we have an audience which keeps growing, which is good. I received permanent residency in 2010, which is actually quite difficult to get, and I'll get back to that later on in this seminar, but I was awarded it purely because I helped the government in some of the programs they were running. Malaysia is a great country to visit, great country to live in, and the MM2H program is one avenue for people who would like to relocate here. We'll get into more details as we progress.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, so I'm here from Melbourne Capital Group. We are a international financial planning company, and we help expatriates and high net worth Malaysians on everything from pensions, everything from medical and life insurances to pensions, savings, investments, with a real focus on structuring, growing and protecting wealth for the current generation, then passing it on through the generations. So we decided basically to come up with this collaboration. At Melbourne Capital Group, we have a lot of clients who are here on MM2H. We've got a lot of expatriates working here who may want to retire here. And then also, personally, I've been writing in the Expat magazine on personal finances for the last few years. So we thought we'd come together and kind of run a series of webinars to update on the program, and also, I guess, promote why we all kind of live here in Malaysia. So over to Andy on a bit of background on the program, and then we'll work through questions.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Before I talk quickly about the background, I do want to say that as a general rule, we have not done these kind of joint ventures with financial service companies, but we've been working with them now for some time, and to be honest, you have to be cautious with financial service companies, in my opinion, but Melbourne Capital have proven themselves to be a very reliable partner, and we've received nothing but good feedback about them. So we're happy to support them in this endeavor and to share our knowledge of the MM2H program, which has been running since 2002. It came after the Silver Hair program, which the government launched in the end of 1990s, but that wasn't that successful. The MM2H program has basically spread through word of mouth. So at first it was rather slow take up, but it gradually picked up. And in 2017, 2018, there were actually about 500 applications being approved every month, which is probably the peak it's reached. They had a few problems after that because a new government came in, and as they are wont to do, they decided to change the rules, which made it rather hard for people to join. The program was suspended a bit during COVID. And last year, in December last year, they came up with some new rules about the program, which I will share with you, but there are some caveats which you need to consider as we go forward. I'll explain them. So basically what the program, as it was announced in December, and I should state that it's been about a year of indications that a new program was about to be launched, with nothing actually being announced. And then suddenly in December, the government came out and said, okay, they're going to replace this single visa with 3 different tiers of visa, which there were silver, gold, and platinum. So the silver one, which is probably the most suitable one for the average retiree, requires you to put a deposit of 500,000 ringgit in a bank account, and they will give you a 5-year renewable visa. If you want to get a longer visa, then you go for the gold program, where you put 2 million ringgit on a fixed deposit, and then you get a 15-year visa. However, I should point out the 15-year visa is issued in 5-year segments, so you still have to go for renewal, but it should be a lot faster than the 5-year visa, which has to go through a more formal process in order to get it renewed. They also are saying that they will have a 3rd tier, which is the platinum, which you put 5 million ringgit into a fixed deposit, and then you'll receive eligibility for permanent residency. Now, Malaysia has been very protective of permanent residency, and so the announcement they were now about to offer it with a 5 million deposit was quite surprising to a lot of people, and therefore we need to emphasize it says eligible for, which is rather different than the other 2 categories, the lower tiers, where you would definitely get the 5-year visa, definitely get the 15-year visa. In this particular case, you're just eligible. However, the one problem with this announcement when it came out was it left out some critical points. One of them was, what is the minimum income you need to show in order to be eligible for any of these visas? And that has not been clarified. We also were not given a start date. So for the last couple of months, quite honestly, we've been trying to find out exactly when the new program will start, and we have heard nothing. On top of that, we have heard through fairly reliable sources that the new program hasn't actually received formal government sign-off. So it looks as though it may have been released a little prematurely. So therefore, it's important when you consider this to recognize that at this point, the program is not accepting new applications. We're hopeful that this will be fixed fairly soon, but at this point, the program essentially is suspended in terms of new applications. For existing participants, there's no problem. You will get your visas renewed according to the expiry date. But for new applicants at the moment, just be patient. Hopefully, the tiers will be approved fairly soon and we can start accepting them again.
Andy, in your experience, are the renewal processes being done, I guess, efficiently at the moment? Maybe efficiently is the wrong word. But yeah, are renewals through?
They are going through. I wouldn't say they're that fast. It's often taking over a month to get them renewed, but they are being renewed. There should be no problem in having your visa renewed as long as haven't got into any trouble while you've been here. You will get it renewed. You just have to be a bit patient.
Yeah, does renewal require a second deposit?
No, what you have to do is you have to show that your existing deposit is still in place. So you need to get a letter from your bank which says, yes, we still have the funds placed there, because some people sometimes manage to pull them out, which they're not meant to do. All you're allowed to do in the past, and apparently in the future, they're going to stick with this, is you can withdraw 50% of the amount you've deposited for selected purposes only, buying property, etc., and education of your children. So for those purposes, you are allowed to withdraw 50%, but the remainder has to stay on deposit until you exit the program, at which time you're allowed to withdraw the money, or your heirs in case of death are allowed to withdraw the money.
And if you have a current MM2H visa, which is coming up for renewal, is there a deferral period whereby you are allowed to apply for that renewal if it's already gone over?
Yeah, you shouldn't have a problem if it's expired by a few months. If you left it too long, then you may well be asked to apply for a new one. It's best to put in the renewal in plenty of time. Usually they accept them up to 3 months before the renewal date, so that's the best advice I can give.
Okay, perfect. Now, can you click us through? Okay, so we've kind of gone through a lot of the common concerns over the current situation. The biggest concern obviously being that currently there are no you can't even put in an application.
Yeah, that's definitely a major concern at the moment, because when the announcement was made, there was a huge amount of interest. A lot of people wrote into us and other agents asking exactly when they would be able to submit the new applications. But until we get details of the actual documentation required, we're not in a position to answer that question. But I'm hoping the next month at least we should get some definitive statement on the start date for the new program.
And on that note, as we are going to be doing a series of different webinars, we will, as soon as there is an update, we will run an additional webinar with Andy to flesh out any of the updates that do come through, alongside the current ones that we're going to be looking at in terms of healthcare, cost of living, and how to structure income. One of the questions we get quite often in terms of the program itself is what types of income do qualify for MM2H. I know currently we are kind of suspended in terms of applications, but historically what types of income did qualify for MM2H?
The key question that the government asks is to show that you have a sustainable form of income, so that they know that when you relocate here you can support yourself. So for the first 20 years of the program, they were basically saying you have to show that you make at least 10,000 ringgit equivalent in foreign currency every month from a source which is sustainable. That could be from investments, it could be, in the past it was from real estate, or it could be a pension. But you need to show that you had the source of the funds and that the money was being placed in a bank account, and you had to do that over a 3-month period. So I imagine that will stay the same. And I know you're in a position to advise people regarding investments and things like that. So
yeah, one question which does come up quite often is if I've got an investment portfolio and it's generating income by, let's say you have dividends or you have interest payable inside of your investment portfolio, does that count as income? Now, I know we were talking before and you said that previously, regardless of whether it's generated inside of an investment portfolio and reinvested, that income doesn't necessarily count towards the MM2H qualifications. Is that the case?
The problem is that the approving department wants to see a document showing the source of the funds, and they like to see a bank account with the money going into it. So unfortunately, we have experienced problems when people say, well, I reinvest all my income back into the portfolio because that does not show any deposit to a bank account. It just shows money going into the same documents as the one where you claimed to have the income from. So they definitely do like to see 2 separate sets of documentation. One, this is the source of my income, which could be a pay slip for a pension, or it could be an investment portfolio. And the other side is your bank statement showing the deposits to the account.
So I suppose on the flip side of that, I typically recommend, in terms of a lot of clients that have, whether it be pensions or other investments that we're looking to try and draw down on the investments or the pensions, we typically say maybe to be sustainable, take 4% of your pot as income, and then you should be able to keep it in line with inflation under normal circumstances, not necessarily the 8, 9, 10% we've been having recently. But if you're taking, say, a 4% withdrawal from an investment vehicle, you should still be able to maintain that pot with a little bit of growth. And also, let's say even if you did have a pot of money and you were taking withdrawals on a monthly basis, say over a 3-month period, historically, I believe that would then show income from an investment coming into your bank account, which may have then qualified you for the rules.
Yeah, I think if they saw it coming out of the capital as opposed to dividends, there would be a problem, because that's questionably how sustainable that is. So they'd want to see that the source document showed it to be dividends or interest payments rather than capital sums being sold.
Okay. Can I set up a business with my MM2H visa?
You can set up a business. The rules in the past, and I want to emphasize again, we haven't got clarification on the rules going forward, but I believe they will probably be very similar. But the rules were you're allowed to own a business, you're not allowed to work in it day to day. So you can own a business, you can attend board meetings, you can give a general oversight of it, but you wouldn't be allowed to go to the office every day, because if you did that, you'd be regarded as an employee, and therefore you'd be required to apply for an employment pass. So that's the distinction. And I think that will continue into the future, because this visa is not really for people who want to come here and work. Although if they would like to invest in a business and run the business and own it, that's fine, but not if they want to be employed here.
Okay. Another, I guess frequently asked question is, does Malaysia accept same-sex marriages? And is there a gender and marital status element to how applications are viewed?
The program is basically open to anybody. However, the country does not recognize same-sex marriages, and in that case, if they were a couple, they would have to apply independently. Generally, that is frowned upon in this country, so therefore it probably wouldn't be the easiest of applications, but they would certainly have to apply and qualify as individuals. But in terms of a male applicant or a female applicant, we haven't seen any real discrimination, as long as they demonstrate that they have the funds to support themselves while they're here and they qualify.
And then I guess that leads on to, if a married couple are here and one of them passes away, how does that affect the visa or the renewal? Does it then mean that the spouse has to also have the income, or can they maintain their visa based on the original application?
This actually leads into one of the areas where we were actually not very happy with the program. They basically made the decision that if the spouse dies, then, if the husband dies, for example, the wife then has to qualify in her own right. And that was a problem for a number of people, particularly people who are on pensions from multinationals, where the wife received half the pension the husband was receiving, and suddenly they went below the previous threshold of 10,000 ringgit a month. So we did have cases where women were required, their spouses had to leave the country because they didn't qualify, because they have to qualify in their own right. We would like to have seen that they would still allow them to continue living here as long as they showed they had sufficient funds to live here, as opposed to meeting the threshold of the program.
Okay. Just opening up to a few of the questions that we're having in the chat here. How old can children be under a parent of MM2H?
They basically allow people under the old program, I want to emphasize again, and hopefully still be the same, but children up to the age of 30. Up to the age of 21 is no problem. Once you get to 21 to 30, they do specifically state you should not be married or working, so that is a requirement.
And on that note, I do actually have a friend whose parents are here on MM2H, and I spoke to him earlier today, and he did say that they're currently looking at him being a dependent on their visa, and he's 28, so it appears that is still the case under the existing rules.
Okay, that's good.
We have one of the questions from earlier, is income from crypto acceptable for the monthly income?
I guess you probably have to answer that one. I'm not quite sure what documentation. The fact is, if you can show documentation which satisfies the immigration committee, then yes, it would be accepted. But I'm not quite sure if the documentation will be sufficient to satisfy them or not.
And I think that also leads on to another question, which was the income to be shown. Is the income? Sorry, it says the income is supposed to be generated from Malaysia, or can it be shown from outside of Malaysia? So I think I can answer this one while you have a drink. The income for the program, the qualifications of income for the program are generally derived outside of Malaysia. Obviously, with the visa, you're not allowed to work here, so you wouldn't necessarily be having employment income here. But if you have pension income from outside of the country, the same for investments, and previously again, rental income, then that can all be outside of Malaysia.
It has to be offshore income, that's correct, yes.
It has to be offshore income on that basis. One question, okay, so the money that you place in a fixed deposit, can you access the interest that accrues on that?
Yeah, you can. You can. All you have to do is leave the capital amount there. You can take the interest out, no problem.
Okay, that's good. Does a spouse as a dependent have to deposit the same fixed deposit as the primary?
No, it's only one the main applicant has to make the fixed deposit. The dependents are not required to. Although, under the last program, they did ask for an slightly increased amount for the spouse, but in the main applicant's deposit account.
Okay. Just going through here. Can you apply in country or do you need to be abroad?
The initial application in the past you could make without being in Malaysia. So you could submit it either directly or through an agent, and they could put all the documentation in. You'll then get conditional approval, and then you have 6 months to come to Malaysia, meet some final criteria, and pick up the visa. So no, you don't have to be there when you apply, but you will have to make a visit before the final stamp is placed on your passport.
What about MM2H for elderly parents?
Yes, under the old rules, they did allow parents of applicants to come along as dependents of the applicants, yes. Hopefully that will still be the case in the future.
Okay. I cannot meet the requirement of the minimum monthly offshore income of 40,000 ringgit, but I, however, meet this requirement if I combine monthly offshore and local income together. Do you think this would fly?
I do not think it would fly, but let me also state that the raising of the monthly income requirement from the 10,000 ringgit that it was at the beginning of the program to 40,000 ringgit requirement was only made 2 years ago, and it received a lot of opposition, and a lot of people suggested that the government reduce it. So we are very hopeful that going forward it will be a much lower figure, because the typical retiree cannot meet the 40,000 ringgit a month income requirement. So the program, Malaysia is losing out.
Couple of property related questions. If you already own a house in Malaysia, can that count towards your assets / fixed deposit?
Unfortunately, it can't. In addition to placing the fixed deposit, in the past you were required to show you had liquid assets, which were about 50% higher than the fixed deposit. So in this most recent program, on arrival you had to put 1 million ringgit into a fixed deposit, but before, on application, you had to show you had 1.5 million ringgit equivalent in liquid assets. So if you bought a house, they would not accept it. And in fact, we had people in some cases who bought a house and they were told that was not part of the qualifying income.
Interesting. Okay, does Sarawak offer a cheaper solution?
Well, Sarawak came out very quickly when they raised the monthly income requirement to 40,000 ringgit. Sarawak came out and said, no, we're not going to do that. So it's important to understand that Sarawak and Sabah both control their own immigration rules and regulations. That was part of the agreement they had when they merged with Malaya to form Malaysia. So in terms of the MM2H program, both Sabah and Sarawak create their own programs. Now, Sarawak decided initially to follow the federal program of West Malaysia. Sarawak created their own program, and they said they would maintain it at the 10,000 ringgit a month requirement. So when the new program came out a couple of years ago, with a significant increase in monthly income, they made quite a benefit by accepting applications at 10,000 at a lower income level. So their program has become quite popular, but there is a requirement that you live in Sarawak if you get that visa. So admittedly, some people lived in West Malaysia with a visa, but the strict requirement is that you do live in Sarawak with a visa.
So I suppose can you hold an employment pass while applying for the Sarawak MM2H program or the current program, or do you have to give it up and then apply for an MM2H program?
That is a problem, because the immigration department insists that you can only apply for a visa when you don't have one. So if you're transferring from one visa to another visa, no matter what visa it is, they want to see you cancel and give up the first one before you can apply for the second one. In the case of a work permit, it is quite frustrating for some people, that when they want to just switch to the MM2H, they first have to give their work permit up and then wait while the MM2H visa is processed, which may mean they have to leave the country at that point.
I have heard from someone who's on the Talent Corp committee that they are looking into some kind of visa which can upgrade the Talent Corp visa, but I don't know if you know anything on that one at the moment.
I don't know. I have heard various rumors going around about it. I'm not quite sure what they're doing about it at this point in time.
And I suppose that leads a little bit on to, with the Talent Corp visa, there is a sort of a stakeholder committee and people that have input. One of the questions we had, which hopefully you won't laugh too much, is there a way to bring up pain points to the relevant government departments in charge in a form of stakeholder consultation to at least get the pain points heard and ideally addressed? Is there a mechanism of how suggestions can be made to decision makers? Currently, decision makers in the program seem to be far removed from the reality of applicants with the pain points experienced.
Okay, well that's somewhat sensitive question, but it's a very valid one. What I can say is, in the past, the government seemed very ready to engage with stakeholders, get as much feedback as possible before they implemented, and if they subsequently received feedback which showed that not everything was being well received, they were willing to look at it and make changes. In recent times, that does not appear to be the case. So decisions have been made which many people have opposed, and not much has been done about it. Having said that, when this new program was announced a couple of years ago, raising the minimum monthly income to 40,000 ringgit a month, there was a lot of comments made in the media by various interested parties stating their opposition to it. And I think that's the reason why this new revised program was announced, is because pressure was from the government indirectly through the media to rethink it, as opposed to them coming to stakeholders and saying, give us your feedback. But I can tell you, when the program first started out, I was invited to go to a lot of government meetings to provide feedback from expatriates' perspective, and that is no longer the case, sadly.
Okay. Couple more that are coming in here. One actually goes back to the Sarawak MM2H. If I apply for that one, will I be permitted to live in KL while still meeting the 1 month presence in Sarawak? I think you kind of covered that one.
Yeah, they're not very keen on it, although, as I said, some people seem to be getting away with it.
Okay. Is there any advantage of previously holding a talent pass visa when applying for MM2H, or will they just look at you completely separately?
There doesn't seem to be any benefit from any previous visa. The key thing they look at is, are you in fact qualifying under the new rules and regulations? And if you do, you'll get accepted. If you don't, then you're going to have problems.
Okay, that's good. Do the Malaysian authorities check the income tax statements of the country where the income comes from?
No, they don't. They don't seem too concerned about that. They just want to make sure that you genuinely have the money and can sustain yourself while you live here. I
suppose this is actually a very good point in terms of how is income taxed in Malaysia from overseas income. I don't know if you want to start, and then maybe I can carry on. Is income taxable? Yeah.
I mean, offshore income is not taxable right now for individuals, as you know. But by all means, take over the question.
Yeah.
It's your field of expertise.
So most people may know, but if not, foreign income in Malaysia is exempt. So if you have pensions or investments or any income that is derived outside of Malaysia and it comes to Malaysia, or it's derived, and even if it doesn't come in, Malaysia does not tax currently foreign sourced income. A couple of years ago, I think it was December 2021, there was a quite a big hoo-ha around how Malaysia being basically exempting the foreign income, and Malaysia was almost grey listed by the OECD because of this exemption. The powers globally decided that maybe it's a bit of a tax haven. They tried to enforce Malaysia to start taxing income from overseas, just as they're trying to tax global corporations and have a minimum corporation tax. there's many countries such as Singapore, Hong Kong, that also have no tax on foreign sourced income. So what Malaysia did back in December 2021 was they implemented, the law was basically changed to say that foreign income is taxable. However, they gave a 5-year exemption for all income. So they kind of tick the box to say, yes, okay, legally speaking, in terms of if global authorities are looking at it, we do tax foreign sourced income. However, we're going to exempt all income for the next 5 years. So Malaysia is still a very tax efficient place to live and have income derived from overseas. And again, going back to an investment portfolio, for example, or a pension, we can help people, or we have clients who have pensions paid out gross of tax from the UK, for example, using the double tax agreement between the UK and Malaysia. So the UK is not taxing it, Malaysia is also actually not taxing it. So happy to have conversations with people around that. And the same goes for if you have an investment portfolio. Let's use easy numbers. You have $1 million invested somewhere like the Isle of Man, and you're generating 4% a year in dividends. That's $40,000 a year in income, which is non-taxable in Malaysia. So it's a very tax efficient place on that basis. Couple more questions before we wrap things up. I guess while I'm here, and we'll come up to the questions, just worth noting that obviously, hopefully today's been useful for a lot of people. We're going to run a series of these webinars for cost of living in Malaysia, healthcare, looking at how to set up your income in a tax efficient manner. We're going to have doctors coming in on some of the webinars, relocation services. We're also going to look at kind of succession planning and the importance of wills and asset protection when it comes to making sure that your beneficiaries get the assets that you want them to. And I think it's also worth noting at this point that Andy and the Expat Group have got an MM2H subscription newsletter, which you can subscribe to here. So please do take a photo of this screen, sign up to their newsletter to get regular updates via email, and we will also be running a series of webinars and giving you updates on the way through. At the same time, if you have any questions regarding kind of personal finance, please also contact us at Melbourne Capital Group, and we'd be happy to help you with any questions you have here. I'll just go back to a few more questions we have coming in.
Can I just intersperse one thing,
Sorry,
which I think probably is worth mentioning, is we do research of expats who live here as part of our desire to understand the expat community, and what we have found is a very high level of satisfaction among people with the MM2H visa about their life here. So the country, despite some of these concerns we have about confusion on the rules and regulations and problems getting visas processed, etc., in terms of lifestyle, Malaysia offers, for those of you who don't know, a very, very enjoyable lifestyle, and there is a very high level of satisfaction as far as the participants in the MM2H program are concerned, in terms of the lives they lead here and how much they enjoy it, in terms of the value proposition, the infrastructural development in the country, the range of cuisines, the weather. On a lot of criteria, Malaysia ranks very highly. So that's just an aside, but it is worth noting if you're not familiar with the country.
Yeah, and I completely agree. As with anywhere, there's always going to be frustrations and little nuances that get on everyone's nerves, but all of us live here. I've been here for 6 years now. You've been here for quite a bit longer. But there's a reason we all do live here. It is a great place to live. So for anyone who is thinking about moving to Malaysia, absolutely it's recommended by everyone. Just going back to a few of the questions. So previously existing MM2H holders were exempted from the new requirements of 40,000 ringgit per month and any other financial requirements. They just had to pay 500 ringgit for a renewal visa. Is this still the case under the recently released requirements? So basically, are renewals still being accepted under the old rules?
Right now, renewals are still being accepted under the old terms that you joined the program with, and we're not seeing any problems in getting them processed. So any new regulations at this point have not been forced upon existing participants, and we will assume that that will continue into the future.
Great stuff. Does the 40,000 ringgit a month monthly income actually have to come into a Malaysian bank account on a regular basis, or is receipt of it into an overseas bank account acceptable?
That's quite acceptable. There is no linkage between the income that you show when you apply and what you bring into the country subsequently as a visa holder.
So effectively, you can have income being generated, paid into a bank account overseas. Malaysia's not taxing you on that. You can leave it there, provided you've got the requirements inside the country, which is the deposits. You would qualify under the rules.
Yeah, right.
Perfect. Is there a requirement to take out private medical insurance like some other countries require?
They do want to see that you have medical insurance when you apply, but if you're over 60, they made exemptions, and the reason for that was because Malaysia in the past would not accept people for medical insurance over the age of 60. Now in the last few years they have raised that age, but for some people they still are outside the accepted age limit to get a proper medical insurance, so in that case they waive the requirement.
Worth noting on this point that the insurers that Andy was talking about that used to have the sort of 60 maybe upper age limit, a lot of those are the Malaysian insurance companies. We work with a lot of international medical insurance companies whereby you can get entry to get insurance up to a much higher age. I actually have insured people well into their 70s, and again, so really just making sure that even if you have quite high deductibles, we can get insurance for those over 60 on an international basis. And again, more than happy to speak to anyone around those. A couple more questions coming in, and then if we have any questions that people still want to ask when we go over time, I think we'll do another 5 minutes or so. We will come back to you afterwards. And again, I also suggest, subscribing to the newsletter for constant updates. But hopefully you guys are finding this interesting and useful. If we buy a house before the application, will it be taken under consideration when the visa is obtained, pertaining to the amount we use from the fixed deposit? So, sorry, the question again, if we buy a house before the application, will it be taken into consideration when the visa is obtained in terms of the fixed deposit?
The fixed deposit has to be made into a bank in Malaysia, so they would not consider the property as part of that.
So even if you have a property here and then you apply for the visa, that's not going to count towards
That's correct. Or even if you move here and then buy a house, you still have to retain that fixed deposit. You can take 50% of the fixed deposit out after 1 year if you bought a property, but that doesn't remove the need for some money in the bank.
Perfect. Easy question, is TEG an MM2H agent? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we Borneo Vision, MM2H. Our website, mm2h.com, is so easy, no one could forget it. So just remember, if you have any questions, we have a help desk. You can contact us and we can tell you. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get regular updates on changes.
How easy is it to import household goods into Malaysia under the MM2H visa?
It's pretty easy, it's pretty straightforward, unless you're bringing obvious taxable items like alcohol in or things like that, but generally speaking, you can't import motor vehicles without a license, which is very hard to get, but probably standard household items, not a problem at all.
Great stuff. Besides the initial and following application fee of 500 ringgit, will the government processing fee of 2,500 ringgit every 5 years still be applicable?
That I really can't say. The Immigration Department took over the program. Now the Ministry of Tourism is also playing their part in the program. No doubt they'll both charge fees, but how much they'll be, I do not know.
Okay. Do they consider EPF savings in Malaysia instead of a fixed deposit?
No, they would not. In fact, the money should be offshore in order to qualify, so unfortunately EPF would not count.
Although you could, in theory, take a withdrawal from the EPF to place a fixed deposit.
And then place it and make it, yes.
Okay. Processing times for MM2H used to be around 1 to 2 years in 2018 to 19, and even under the revised program, it still took 9 to 12 months to come through. Will the newly revised programme, once it's announced, have a more streamlined application process and fast approval? Also, just out of curiosity, what's taking them so long? After all, an MM2H visa is just a long-term multiple entry tourist visa.
I can tell you that when the program first started out, they were being processed a lot faster than that. Then changes were made in the government, new people took over, a lot of new learning curves were suddenly introduced, and people were having to wait, as you say, up to a year to get approval. That was a short period relatively. In the last 2 or 3 years, they have been very, very slow. We certainly hope it will be a lot faster, because I can tell you as agents, having someone call us up every week saying what's happened to my visa can be quite frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that's I don't think it's just an MM2H problem. I think it's I think visa processing times in Malaysia in general are taking a little while at the moment. Part of that, I believe, is because since COVID, a lot of people have been, a lot of the government agencies have been working from home, yet they still work on a paper-based system. So some of that, I think, is the reason for some of the delays. Of course, we'd like it to be done quicker. And
I think it will be. I think there's no reason they shouldn't go back to the previous speed, which was more like 2 or 3 months.
Is the income requirement for a single person 7,000 ringgit, or is that only for the Sarawak scheme?
That's only for Sarawak. They have a lower limit, but for the West Malaysia, they require their full amount.
And as mentioned earlier, under the Sarawak visa, technically you do actually have to live in Sarawak.
That's technically, yes.
Well, yeah. Okay, I think maybe the final one for today. Are the renewals and new applications still being handled by the Immigration Department, or has it reverted to the Ministry of Tourism?
The initial review of papers is now done by Tourism. They then pass it to Immigration for final approval. So the idea here is to make it a little bit more user-friendly at the front end, but ultimately it still requires Immigration to sign off.
Okay. Okay then, and one more while we're here. Can you apply for renewal of MM2H while outside of Malaysia?
Unfortunately, you cannot. We've tried to persuade the government to do that, but they have not been agreeable. They want to see you in the country when you renew.
Okay. So, yeah, I think hopefully that's given most people a good amount of information today in terms of where we currently are with the program, or where we currently aren't with the program. But we are going to continue, as I say, with a number of future webinars based on various different areas in Malaysia, how to structure the income, what's the healthcare system like, cost of living, and succession planning alongside. I guess the other point is, if anyone has any specific topics that they'd also like us to do a webinar on or a session on, please also do get in contact and let us know, because if you have questions, then I'm sure other people also do. If you found this one useful, please do give us a review on Google. It always helps, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Subscribe to the MM2H website and newsletter, and we will send everyone a summary of today, and look forward to seeing you all next time.
Excellent. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you very much.